Hey guys, welcome back to Seller Sessions. Again, I bring back Sean Smith. Hey Sean, how you doing?
What's going on, Danny? Thanks for having me on, brother. Always a blessing.
No worries. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about impressions, but before we do,
Hey,
we're going to be
doggy.
talking about the bulk file updates.
Yeah, this is actually super exciting. Amazon updated. So what they did was they made some pretty big sweeping changes that most people have noticed. Like they've updated their graph, they updated the UI of your user interface of the campaign manager, so it looks different. A lot of people are seeing that. And a lot of people have qualms about the actual UI itself, which I understand because I've had some issues with sorting and filtering and all that stuff. But you know me, I don't really spend a ton of time in Campaign Manager personally,
Yeah.
mainly because I just don't need to. And so, you know where I went straight to? I went straight to the bulk files. And so one thing I noticed was Amazon allows you to download zero impression keywords, which I think is extremely epic because it allows us to adjust bids for keywords that don't have any impressions. Whereas before, you would literally have to go to the campaign, you'd have to click on the ad group, you'd have to find the keyword, you'd have to adjust the bid.
Yeah.
Imagine doing that for 20 keywords. It would take you way too long. Versus with bulk file, you can just copy
So
and
what?
paste
Yeah.
in cells and then upload it, and then you're good to go. So this is something that we're using. That's something that like we want to build systems for, so that we can increase impressions for like longer tail keywords. It's amazing. I'm super excited for it. The file size is a lot bigger, by the way. So when you download the file, it's going to take a little longer to download. But it's awesome. And what it allows you to do is keep a snapshot of the keywords that, those zero impression keywords before and after you make the changes, so that if you do make an increase on these and you see negative effects, you can go ahead and upload that previous file.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons I like bulk file. It allows you to have a before and after snapshot. So zero impression keywords is a huge, huge upgrade for Amazon in terms of giving us data and allowing us to do things that are way more powerful.
And of course, if you're working with larger accounts and multiple accounts where you run an agency, that's going to speed up
Yeah.
your time flow as well. So let's talk about page impressions. I asked you a question last week. I sent you a Skype message, which I
Yeah.
find kind of interesting in the sense that it's different when it's on say a desktop but with a mobile with infinite scroll, we're talking about page impressions. So where does that begin and end was the question, wasn't it?
Yep.
So if we look at basically what a page impression is, do you want to read it out for us, like a description of the
Yeah.
of the internet?
Yeah, that's internet. So I just literally impression definition advertising in Google, and then
Yeah.
I got one of their I don't know what they call them, the infographics or whatever they call them. I can't remember, but it's by
Infographics,
First
yeah.
Marketing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Impression, sometimes called a view or an ad view, is a term that refers to the point in which an ad is viewed once by a visitor or displayed once on a web page.
Yeah.
So according to this, it's an or statement. So it's either so it can be viewed or not viewed, and it will
Yeah.
still be counted on
So
the
if you take it back a bit, if you look at the Google Display Network and you've got all the different, there's hundreds of creatives, I can't remember the total amount, but you've got like leaderboards, haven't you? And then you've got the skyscrapers down the sides, and there's a lot of websites out there that have the banner below the fold as well. But you don't often get to see those sites. So you could be generating impressions, but your click-through rates are going to be super poor because they're below the fold and no one's seeing them. So which brought to my attention is, what is the official line by Amazon on impressions, especially on a mobile device that's got infinite scroll?
That's a good question. That's
And
something that I'm going to ask some people about.
Yeah, I think that should be asked because it plays an important role, because obviously in order to start the process off to enter the auction, you need impressions. That's your first step, isn't it? Yeah.
Yep.
So as long as you're known, you're appearing in the auction, your bids are high enough to enter the auction, and it's not to do with relevance or something else, from the back end, then that plays a key role as the entry point to the rest of the data. Yeah, because then you go from impressions, so you go to clicks, and then go from clicks to conversions, etc. So let's talk about that in the sense of you can be generating loads of impressions. And I know that Brian talks about this, that you might feel that you've got so many impressions on a on a keyword or a search term,
Yeah.
and you say, well, this is not relevant, and you could dismiss that search term.
Yep.
But what if most of the searches are appearing from mobile devices, and they're so far down below the fold that people are not seeing them, therefore not clicking on your ad, and really it's down to how much you bid.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be like a completely accurate data set, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because we all think about, oh, well, that's not relevant. We'll trim that off. That's had 1,000, 1,500 impressions. No one's clicked in on it. Therefore, to diagnose it, I mean, it could be down to the fact that your price is super high, or you've got terrible images, etc.
Yeah. Oh, so what you're saying is like it's down to the bid because you might get all these impressions, but they're not being seen pretty much.
Yeah, because they're not being seen, then you're looking at if you're looking at the data in isolation, the easiest way to do it is going to do a search and look for your ad, depend on the marketplace. You might use the VPN or whatever, right? But ultimately, if you look at it from a purely data point of view in isolation, you might actually be Xing out keywords that actually are viable. It's just that you've not bidded in the correct manner.
Competitively enough.
Yeah, competitively enough. And so it would be good to understand where the line is drawn with Amazon in terms of where does the impression count begin and end on a mobile device.
And it would be good to know, like, if they could give us impression by device and impression by placement as well. Yeah. Because then we'd be able to troubleshoot that like accurately. Because then we could be like, hey, we're like popping up at the bottom of the, wherever it is. So we need to increase the bid. Yeah.
Yeah. Because sometimes you're looking for certain things like from our understanding from millions of data points is that, and I've mentioned this on the show before, you might not have impressions because 1, down to bid, 2 is down to relevant, 3 is down to your category. And the 4th one is if you've got no conversion history and you're a new account and you're going after a large keyword, Amazon sometimes will just not run that keyword. So there's a lot of play. There's a lot of stuff in play there to isolate, to work out, well, what is the cause for this in the point of when you start to diagnose what the issues are.
Yeah, you got to segment each data piece, and you have to figure out, because you have to have a competitive offer, and man, you have to be relevant. Like you have to be relevant. And Amazon's like implementing like more character restrictions, which is like, I think they're kind of like forcing relevancy that way. Yeah. And so, yeah, dude, you have to make sure that all the variables are stacked up to even make it like a solid decision. Yeah.
So where are you with click-through rates at the moment?
What's my stance on click-through rates?
Yeah.
It's a little different. I don't really use click-through rate at all, actually, mainly because I haven't found, and this is just my philosophy, like everybody has their own. So this is based off information that we've collected. So CTR, we still haven't found like a correlation between CTR and conversion for us. And so like, we don't use click-through rate like too much as an indicator for sponsored products. And that's just because we haven't, and I don't know why that is. Like, you would think like high CTR equals, high conversions and stuff like that. It's not always the case. And so it's one of those things where we haven't like spent a ton of time and resources on that. We optimize for conversions at the end.
Yeah, of course.
For us. Yeah. CTR, we don't pay attention even as an early indicator for conversion. Yeah. And that's just because I haven't found a strong enough case for it to like the correlation. And I don't know why that is. It could be, I don't know. It could be Amazon on their end, like maybe data attribution practices. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean,
how about you?
Well, for me personally, I can't speak for Ellis. Obviously, he does a lot of the data crunching because he's a data scientist. But from my perspective on stuff, I find that click-through rate plays an important part. Well, it did on Google anyway, but it plays an important role for me as an indicator on first view, not down the funnel, but on first view. Because I look at that, if I've got a good click-through rate, either competitors are clicking on the ad, which can happen, but I think a lot of times it's just that people are clicking through and not the requirements of the listing maybe not meeting. Because sometimes people say, I've run out of budget early in the morning. It may be that you're in a super competitive category. There are a lot of clicks. Your images are telling the story. You go through the listing and they're put off by the bullet points. That could also be a factor. There's so many different variables there. But I like
competition will destroy it. Yeah, competition.
I find
That's
one of the common things that I often see, for me, in terms of low click-through rate, one of the standouts that I've seen and I kind of catch is that if I get asked why it's got a low click-through rate, I can often see is that they're bid pretty well to be in a desirable ad position, but their price could be quite high. So people may like the product, the images and everything look good, but when they look at the value proposition to the rest of the page, they'll see that the price is a bit out of reach. So even though they've got good visibilities, they're in the main ad slots at the top one, positions 1, 2, or 3, depends on what device that they're on. The click-through rate ends up being poor because people don't like the price. Yeah.
I could see that, man. I don't do much with the CTR, but I think just because the only reason it's just because even if we have a high CTR, if we're not converting, then it's hard to justify the spend for us.
And what do you do? Obviously, you pre-calculate what you're doing in terms of for your clients is that what the budget they've got to spend in terms of their margins and A costs. So obviously you can't go over, or you attempt not to go over those. But what do you do when you want to go after certain keywords, but you're not getting any impressions because your bids are not high enough?
That's a good question. So usually we'll troubleshoot the product itself. So like we'll look at the actual like overall volume, like just like in the business reports. And if it's a low volume product, then that could explain it. I think that's one thing, because you can't really generally, if a product isn't doing well organically, then it won't do well on the advertising side. And you have to kind of treat it like a relaunch type thing to get the visibility back and all that stuff. So that's kind of like the where we start there. And then if we're not getting visibility for something like a main keyword, we just have to ask ourselves, if usually we can get it if we keep increasing the bids, but we'll make sure that we're indexed for that phrase. We need to be indexed for that phrase. So we have to be indexed, because if not, then we're lower on the relevancy table, the relevancy poll. And then if we're going after the keyword, usually it'll work after that. But if the bid's too high, or if it's not cost efficient enough, then we just won't go after that one in that match type. So that's why we like to use all 3 match types, because it gives us an opportunity to win the auction in different areas.
Makes total sense.
So that's kind of how we handle those, because there are certain times where it's good to go after those keywords and sometimes where there aren't. But that's kind of how we troubleshoot it if we're not getting that type of visibility, because it tells us that, if you're not getting impressions for a keyword and you're bidding competitively, then you got to look at the relevancy portion of it. That's the big thing, I feel like.
Yeah, makes total sense. Cool. Is there anything you want to cover off before we go?
No, man, we covered some good stuff, man. I'm full. My tummy's full of knowledge.
Excellent. Sounds good. Cool. How's the best way people can reach you?
Oh yeah. You can do ppcamsaccelerator.com or Sean at ppcamsaccelerator.com.
Excellent, guys. Thank you for joining us. Sean, thank you for joining us. If this is your first time, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you again in the next few days. Take care.